Thank you, man. Thanks, Ann. How you doing? Good day? It's good, right? Man, that was some good poetry. Well done, Padraig. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the author and the founder of the L'Arche community, a gentleman called Jean Vanier. He has an incredible book, just a small little book here about it. He writes many good books called Encountering the Other. And he says this: when we encounter, we come to know. When we come to know, we are able to understand. When we understand, healing and peace can really grow. Peace cannot be imposed by politicians or churches. Peace has to grow within each person if it's to endure. Our society can only be healed when each person in it is healed. That healing comes not from avoidance or separation, but from the encountering. We, in Ireland, and you're very aware of this, with the news cycles, what we see in our papers and televisions and on the internet, that we're in a defining moment right now in our nation. And we're going to be judged on how we serve and how we encounter the other, the refugee, or those seeking asylum and safety in this nation. So it's an absolute honor to welcome up this panel of guests who will be discussing over the next 30 minutes what it is to receive direct provision, fight against it, looking at the migration crisis from different people from all walks of life. So please, put your hands together for Carol Baxter from the Department of Justice, Dr. Máiréad from Christian Aid, Thiru from Sri Lanka, Marissa Ryan from Oxfam Ireland, and Dave Moriarty from the Jesuit Refugee Services. Come on up. Have a seat. Have a seat. Grab a mic if there's a mic there. It's great to have you all here. Hi, Thiru. How are you? You have to stand. So thank you very much, each one of you, for coming today. It's a large panel, so we're going to be asking a few questions to each one of them. If we have time, we might go into a Q&A. But Carol, welcome. Marissa, Máiréad. Do you like Dr. Máiréad or Máiréad? Just Máiréad. Who put doctor on there? Thiru and David there at the end. Actually, yeah, I'll scoot over here so I can see a bit better. Cool. So just to start out, Thiru, can you just tell us a little bit about your story? You've defined yourself as a Sri Lankan asylum seeker. Is that correct? Or those seeking asylum? Can you tell us a little bit about your story, please?
Yeah. I came from Sri Lanka, and I'm an exile journalist and poet. And everyone knows about the civil war and genocide against Tamils. The Sri Lankan government killed everyone, and at the same time I'm working as an environmentalist also in the ministry. So, I'm helping my people, when I write articles in the newspapers to don't kill the people, kind of. So I'm abducted by the military. I have no cases. I have no courts, nothing in Sri Lanka. It's an illegal abduction. 65,000 people were abducted and killed by the military without any cases. So I think I'm the only one survivor from that particular brutal torture prison. So I'm abducted one night by the military and paramilitaries, and I'm brutally tortured. And after 5 days, they throw me in the bush and they went. Luckily, I'm not dead. Then someone took me from there to India through the sea, and nearly 8 months, I'm unable to walk. I'm in the bed, and I don't like to describe how they tortured me. So then after, I'm writing when I was in the bed. Then again, the Indian government, and they asked me to stop writing, to supporting Tamils. Because India is also one of the big partner for this genocide. So, but I'm still writing. So then again, India illegally detained me. They have dark rooms. They can't file any case against me because I'm a non-violent element. So again, they detained me with, nearly 9 months. And then after, someone from Dublin, they organized a People's Permanent Tribunal in Dublin. And I came here as a victim of torture. And I gave my witness and in the Dublin court front of judges. Then after, because I came from the 35 degrees, the first European visit in 2010 is -5. So I don't know where am I and what I'm doing. Even I didn't wear the clothes properly. So, oh my God, I fall down the road. Oh, what is going here? Then after that, I didn't seek asylum here actually because I have no one here. So I don't know what can I do. I can't go back. And I went to London and seek asylum, and they asked, where are you coming from? I said, Ireland. It's passport. Oh no, first landing country is asylum country, and they again arrest me and detain me 6 months. And then again send me here, then again seek asylum, and 4 years, different places. First they send me call Killarney, and
sorry about that.
Then 2 years, then after moved to Waterford, then moved to Longford, then moved to Dublin. Finally they said, okay, dead or alive, I'm going to die here. So someone, some writers, then finally they grant some not status to stay in this country. I'm here. That's how,
And you live in Carlow now?
Yeah, I'm in Carlow now, because it's very hard to find a home in Dublin.
Of course.
Us,
Do you have any family here?
Yeah, with my son,
With your son? How old is your son?
9.
9 years old.
Yeah.
Is the rest of your family back in Sri Lanka or India? Is the rest of your family back in?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
When's the last time?
Me and son, because it's a long term, because when I left country, it's a personal story, and just my son is, I'm married 2007, and I'm abducted 2008, so just son is 6 month baby. When I show my son, he's 9 years old, 8 years old. I didn't see him very recently. I show him, this is my son, and he said, this is my father. So when I left my wife, she's 26, 27. Then when I met her again, she's 34, 35, 8. So it's not work out. So I'm with my son here. I'm happy with him. So
Sorry
life is
to hear
going
that.
and now I'm just working through the Thiru scheme or something, in the Ireland scheme, government scheme, in the Carlow Museum.
In drug provision?
Just in the Carlow Museum.
Oh, great. Okay.
Just kind of, working, just helping through the scheme. I don't like to stay in the home, so just go and work 3 days.
Thank you for your story, Thiru. Carol, you work with the Department of Justice, is that right? What is your role there?
I head the Asylum Services Integration and Equality Brief, so we don't determine the policy on immigration or who has refugee status, but rather we provide the actual accommodation services to people.
And how many asylum seekers would there be right now in Ireland?
We have 2 categories of people. We have programme refugees. You'll be aware that the government has committed to bringing in 4,000 refugees under its programme refugee status. They're people, I suppose, mainly Syrians who are located temporarily in either Lebanon or in Greece. We're participating in the EU relocation mechanism to bring people who are stuck in Greece over to Ireland. So 4,000. So at the moment, 1,400 of that 4,000 are in Ireland. And then separately, like Mohammed, there are a series of people who come, what we call spontaneously, and seek asylum in Ireland. And they can either opt to go into the direct provision system, in which they get accommodation, basic services provided for the government, or they can opt to be completely independent. So and roughly about 50% of people opt to go into direct provision, and 50% of people opt to be completely self-sufficient. So at the moment, we have 4,300 people in direct provision. So we would say then, based on that, there are roughly about 8,000 people making claims for asylum at the moment, and then 1,400 refugees.
And there's been a lot of controversy around direct provision, is that correct? What is it? How do you view direct provision as someone who works at the Department of Justice?
I suppose the difficult thing for somebody who comes newly to Ireland claiming asylum is that inevitably you have to go through a process of proving your case and at the same time you don't know the system in Ireland at all. So I suppose we see direct provision as a pragmatic thing where you get accommodation, you get your food, you get shelter. Anybody who wants to have accommodation gets the chance to have that. We don't turn people away. So I know it tends to be greatly criticised, but it's intended as that emergency space where you get the chance to have basic needs respond to while you make your case. Now, inevitably, the difficulty has been that it has taken much longer for people to have their cases processed, where I suppose there's a dispute between the government and the person. Some people, their cases are heard very quickly because both they and the government agree that they're refugees. With others, there's a whole challenge, judicial review process, and that's why for some people the process can take years. You may be aware that the government in 2015 enacted a new International Protection Act, which makes it processing times much more quicker. Essentially, the person will be assessed for all of the tests. If you're a refugee, if you're entitled to the lesser subsidiary protection, or if the minister should give leave to remain. So processing will take much shorter time in the future.
And David, you work with the Jesuit Refugee Services. Can you pass the mic there through? Thank you. On the ground, what does direct provision look like? Because you're working on the ground, is that right?
Yeah, no, that's true. So we're present in 10 direct provision centres throughout Ireland. And I suppose just to pick up on the length of time issue, because in our experience that has been the single biggest issue facing asylum seekers living in direct provision, for the sole reason that all the associated negative costs and impacts of communal living, of not having input over, certainly in the early days of direct provision, over what you eat, having a prohibition on access to the labour market, lacking meaningful access as an adult to education, having a paltry weekly allowance, all of that maybe is bearable for a number of months. But the working group was mentioned. At that period, there was 40% of the population in direct provision who'd been in the system for 5 years or more. There was children who'd grown up in the system. We've seen families break down within the system. So it's that length of time issue that for many years JRS Ireland has advocated for. And I suppose one of the most concerning developments is, yes, we saw some positive outcomes from the working group where in the 12 months following the publication of the report, about 1,500 people who had been in the system for 5 years or more had their status resolved. So that meant they had the opportunity to finally leave and exit the direct provision system and begin life in Ireland. Unfortunately, what we're seeing now is the return of these delays. Someone entering the system now is facing an 18 to 24 month wait until they get an interview. So any of the negative impacts that still remain, regardless of the improvements that have been made, and look, we can discuss them, there's no issue there. There have been improvements made to living conditions and supports, but regardless of those, for 18 months to 24 months at the initial stage, and that's assuming we don't have an influx of greater numbers, which increases that to 3-4 years again, all of those impacts will be felt greater by individuals and families during that time.
And David, for a child that grows up in direct provision, how do you see that affecting them as a child in the way that they are educated, the way that they are learning, the way that they are integrating into society?
Well, I suppose if we start at the home environment, because it is an unnatural environment, I understand the necessity. We don't want individuals living on the street, and direct provision was a mechanism to prevent homelessness, so to prevent people arriving in Ireland who were seeking international protection, to prevent them being homeless and destitute. So that's important to acknowledge and recognise, but it's not a natural environment for a child to grow up in a single room with a sibling and their parents. It's not natural for them to see a lot of decisions that would usually rest within a parent to be directed through a stranger, a centre manager. It's not natural for them to grow up in direct provision and at no point see their parents go to work or benefit from a home-cooked meal. And up until recently, that was very much the experience of children. Also, children, I'm not a child development specialist, but children are known to experience time differently. Mm-hmm. So whatever impact on an adult, a number of years living in direct provision, if you grow up and that's all that you know, and you can't bring friends home and everything else I mentioned, mm-hmm. and you live there for years, that's going to have a long-term negative impact. There's no question.
Carol, how do we expedite this? Is there, I mean, you can't answer for all of the government, I understand that, but how do we get this out of this kind of cycle, this trap that we're in? That seems like you're trying to provide, which is incredible, but yet you get caught in 5-year lags where they can't get recognized as our citizens or even get what they're seeking. How do we make this go faster? I mean, that's a technical word, make go faster, but how do we actually do that?
I suppose one of the very practical things we're trying to do within the department is allocate more resources to the processing.
Okay.
So that cases can be moved forward more quickly. We do think that the impact of the 2015 Act will make itself felt over the next year to 18 months, so that.
And do you have mechanisms to test that so that we can?
Well, very practically, the International Protection Office knows how many cases it can process in any 1 week.
Okay.
So it's constantly assessing in terms of how quickly it can process. I mean, in the meantime, as David said, from my responsibility is while people are in direct provision to ensure that the conditions are improving. So we are focusing very much, particularly on families and children.
Okay.
We are in a difficult position at the moment. We have 93% capacity within the system. That leaves, we have about 150 spare spaces any night. That's not very much in a 4,500 system. But what we are trying to do is really focus on, as David has said, we have introduced supermarkets into our Mosney system, which is our biggest one, to try and move into introducing self-catering. So really start with children and their parents so that they get the experience of their parents making meals and living as in family settings. And we're also moving to a tendering process in terms also of getting new centres where we can, again, get better centres. It's never going to get over the fact that, as David said, being in a centre is a difficult experience for some people, but at least if the experience is better and more approximate of family life, that it's preferable. I suppose what we're interested, and people of faith here today, we are very interested in NGOs joining that process of running centres and working with them. We feel that they can actually bring expertise and that we're not just working with commercial providers. We feel that not-for-profits can bring a great value added there. So we're particularly interested in them or religious groups coming on board to operate centres even on a pilot basis to see can we have a different experience for people.
I'm going to ask a bit more about that a bit later, but Marissa, you work for Oxfam Ireland, and I know a lot of your work is more international, is that correct? How are you finding the impact of those that you're working with, refugees and asylum seekers?
So Oxfam responds in 9 of the 10 countries where the majority of the world's refugee flows are coming from. Okay. So places like Afghanistan, Syria, Somalia, Pakistan and so on. And we also respond in Europe to people fleeing from those places but arriving in either Greece or Italy or the Western Balkans. One of the biggest problems we have seen, and much as we provide immediate support such as shelter, education, psychological support and so on, in refugee camps. Now we are responding in Europe in a way that we have never seen since Oxfam started in the 1940s in response to the Second World War. And one of the reasons for this is because we now have to campaign and respond on the policies that are making people end up in Europe with no access to basic rights. Okay. And over the last 2 years, as everybody here knows, there was a spike of migration to Europe, people fleeing from Syria and then also from other crises. And what happened, instead of a sensible response of EU leaders coming together to look at how this could be managed effectively and responding to human dignity, what has happened is a complete crisis of mismanagement, where people in the Western Balkans were living in minus 10 degrees outside for lack of basic shelter provided by states. EU member states were kettling people back and forth across borders because they wouldn't allow them to use their right to seek asylum. And in places like Greece and Italy, people were living in camps where children were kept in cages because they had no quarters for juveniles.
Oh my God.
So here in Ireland, what we're trying to do is raise awareness of Ireland's role in the EU to combat this kind of behaviour. The EU is now using all of the means at its disposal to prevent people from using their right to seek asylum in Europe. People are being pushed back at every turn since the EU-Turkey deal. And then those who actually have arrived either in Greece or Italy or the Western Balkans are living in appalling conditions. So one of the things I just briefly wanted to mention today that I think is really terrific is we have a program in Italy called the Humanitarian Corridors Program, which was initiated between Oxfam and a group of faith-based organisations from across Italy, initially with the Council of Methodist Churches, but then other partners came on board from other faith-based organisations. And what it did was provide the very first scheme in Europe where civil society and faith-based organisations could work with a government of the EU to provide a safe and legal way of people to access Europe. So that means less people getting into unsafe boats. It means less people ending up in camps or being tortured on borders or attacked by dogs or shot with rubber bullets, which is what was happening. We had 80 Syrian families arrive last year in Italy. The church's role is integration, so Oxfam brings the people over with humanitarian visas supplied by the Italian government, and then we work with faith-based organisations to integrate people in towns around Tuscany and further down into the south of Italy. And it's proving so useful and so good, and the Italian government are so in favour of it that we're now extending it to people from Lebanon and Morocco in 2018. So it's a very practical example of how we can kind of surmount the absolute depraved situation that people are facing if they're put back into Libya, for example, or if they end up as a young person in Sicily and end up being trafficked, which is also what's happening.
That's happening. I mean, it's so easy to get complacent, isn't it? But you're talking about real people, real children, real fathers, real mothers and sisters and brothers who are experiencing these horrific environments. How do we not just get complacent? Right now I'm obviously moved by what I'm hearing from the whole panel, but I'll walk out of here and grab a coffee and it's gone. How do we keep that how do we get engaged, I guess I'm trying to ask you, Marissa?
I think it's very difficult. What we saw in Oxfam was in 2015 when the pictures of Aylan Kurdi, the little 5-year-old from Syria who washed up on a beach in Turkey and who drowned with his mother and his 5-year-old brother just 1 mile from the shore. We saw a huge public outcry in Ireland. People were ringing Oxfam every single day, offering everything they had, pledging beds, pledging blankets, medicines, everything that they could, money. There was marches in Dublin saying refugees are welcome here. And that pressure that was put on the government resulted in the scheme Carol talked about, the Irish Refugee Protection Programme, which was to initiate a scheme to welcome 4,000 refugees between 2015 and 2017. And I thought that was extraordinary. The solidarity, the engagement across all groups in Ireland, in all parts of Ireland, was so heartening. But since then, things move on. It's not as visible anymore. Ireland's a small country on the periphery of Europe, so we actually don't even receive a large amount of refugees and migrants anyway. And then in addition, it's really sad, but people constantly want to make distinctions between people who are discriminated against. So homelessness is something we often get people telling us, well, you can't expect homelessness to be solved if you're always arguing for the rights of refugees and migrants. And my response is always, actually the saying is that charity starts at home, but it does not end there. And nobody remembers the second half of that sentence.
Conveniently,
But I think what's really important is where there are communities that are engaged and really willing to stand up for the rights of discriminated people from wherever they're from, to organise and to lobby, and whether that's at local level with your elected politicians, or it's with churches to work with communities to sensitise them why these people are in this village, what's happening to them, or to work with local authorities to say, look, we know of these people in this situation.
So one follow-up question, of the 4,000 that were promised to come in before 2017, we're in, October, so we got, 8 weeks ago-ish. How many Syrian refugees have come into the country?
I'll let Carol answer that
Carol.
one.
And actually, just one point, it wasn't the end of 2017,
Okay.
and we had the relocation piece, the Greece piece was to be the end of 2017. So we've 1,406 people in at the moment. We will have another 700 people that are coming over the next couple of months. We have quite a quick pace of people coming from, particularly from Greece at the moment.
Call me naive, but it just seems weird that we say there's millions of displaced people around the world, and in Syria there's how many, 2.5? I don't. There's also IDS people as well, internally displaced peoples, IDPs. I'll come to you, Máiréad, on that in just a second. But we say 4,000. We have just over 1,000. We're saying 700 more. What's the delay?
Very practically, you're talking about setting up new lives for people.
Okay.
And we had to learn too. We had gone from a refugee program that had 260 people a year to ramping up. And I have to say, in fairness to our local authorities, and that they have been, but actually everybody has risen to the challenge. But we are learning, so in terms of how you get people firstly into accommodation, how you get people into schools, how you get people into local communities, that isn't a skill we knew in 2015 in any kind of. So we've had to learn it,
okay.
And now we have a system in terms of very practically. It took time for local authorities to get housing, so now we've worked with 14 counties. We're working with another 10 counties. We're using EU funding to bring in support workers to each county. We had to learn how to do that. And I suppose just very quickly, I know time is limited. We are very interested, very practically, in faith-based organisations helping us in terms of accommodation throughout the country. The Red Cross is coordinating a pledged programme where pledged accommodation can actually be put at the disposal of refugees. And I suppose particularly we're very interested in a Dublin context with the housing crisis. Pledged accommodation gives more refugees the chance of being in Dublin. We have a distribution key in terms of local authorities outside Dublin providing accommodation, but it is very difficult for the Dublin
There are practical ways of us getting involved, sure.
Okay.
Ways, yes. And Máiréad, all these mics being passed to you. Thank you for flying over. You came over from London. Is that right? Yeah. Thanks for you work with Christian Aid. Yours is more of a Middle Eastern-based work. Is that correct?
Yeah, so I'm the advocacy officer for Syria, Iraq and Lebanon for Christian Aid UK.
And you brought this up with me earlier, that you described the issue of returns, especially in the area of Lebanon and Syria, where refugees, their future isn't called into question no matter where they go. But what is a return and how does that work?
Yeah, I mean, it is literally just what it is. It's the idea of returning to their place where they've come from. So for Syrian refugees, returning from any of the places where they have gone to as refugees. The idea of returns is a long-standing issue in the Middle East, and usually thought of in terms of Palestine and the right of return. But for Syrians in Lebanon, it's the key issue is around safety and safe return and returning to somewhere that is safe. Just to get an idea of the situation for refugees in Lebanon, there's over 1 million Syrian refugees in Lebanon, which makes up a quarter of the population there. The Lebanese government hasn't ratified the Refugee Convention, and there aren't any official camps for refugees in Lebanon. So people are living in informal tented settlements on private land, or they're renting accommodation, usually at vastly inflated rates. It's worth noting that globally, most people who are displaced do not live in camps. I think people tend to think of that and assume then that people have access to services when they're displaced, and it's not the case. The vast majority of people who are displaced do not live in camps.
Where do they live?
Rented accommodation. And when I say rented accommodation, the rented accommodations I have seen in Lebanon have been car garages.
Okay.
And you can imagine how cold that is. A shed with no windows, with the rain coming in under the door. That is what people are renting. So that's what you have to picture people living in, and that would be maybe a step up from one of the tents in the Bekaa Valley, where again rain is coming in during the winters in Lebanon are really very harsh. So people in tents without sufficient blankets, and also if you've been a refugee for 6 years and you've that same mattress that you were given the first day, and you've had 6 winters, it's a very, very grim situation. So for Syrians as well, they haven't been given the right to access most livelihoods. It's very limited around construction, agriculture, cleaning, and even then those jobs are limited, and they would be expected, and they know that people will work for extremely small wages. There's limits to access to movement and so on. So even though up until now there's been no real forced returns from Lebanon, I spoke to somebody from the Lebanese legal rights NGO earlier this year, Legal Agenda, and he said the Lebanese government isn't physically deporting, it's mentally deporting people. So if you make a situation bad enough for people, you can hope that they'll eventually just give up. And people have started, unbelievably, to return to Syria, not in droves, but people have, because it is that bad that they would rather be there.
And it's not like Syria is all of a sudden safe.
No.
It's just it's worse where they are.
Yeah. I mean, you mentioned numbers inside Syria, and these numbers now are on such a kind of a spiral in my head, but you have 13.5 million people inside Syria who need humanitarian support, and this is within a response where there's only 20% of that response is fully funded. So there's nowhere near enough relief getting there. You have 6.5 million people internally displaced, and you have 4.5 million people in besieged or hard to reach areas. So these are areas besieged by mostly by the government and its allies, but also in other areas also by opposition groups, where aid is not allowed to get in, and often cases when it does get in, as was the case, I think it was in September, in Eastern Ghouta, where half the stuff is missing when it comes in. So they'll remove, at the checkpoints, they'll remove all the medical supplies and things like this.
What's going to change this? I mean, what is going to change this?
I mean, the answer in some ways is extremely simple. It's like a peaceful settlement, peaceful political settlement that ensures that people can return safely and return by choice.
Because there could be another Aleppo, right?
Yeah. I mean, this is the thing I think we and people do, and including myself, talk about another Aleppo, and this, of course, refers to December last year when we watched on our TV screens and on YouTube the utter destruction of eastern Aleppo, which was kind of the last area of that city held by opposition groups, which led to massive displacement. But the thing is, it's sad, I think, that we have to have a standard when we'll say this is too bad. Yeah. Because Eastern Ghouta has been shelled for years now. Idlib in the recent months is being shelled. Raqqa, as part of the anti-ISIS coalition offensive, has been shelled and killed thousands of civilians as well. So in a way, we've already had plenty more.
Yes, of course.
Aleppos, but maybe we've not had enough people dead to call them that, and to be frank. Yeah. That there is certainly the possibility that there will be something as bad as Aleppo was last December.
So I'm sitting here, I'm feeling overwhelmed by this. Good, that's a great feeling. I want to be overwhelmed by this because I can live a distracted life very easily. But I'm hearing that there's been so many other Aleppos. I mean, what can we do? What can be done as an individual, as a group,
I think it goes back again already what Marissa was saying. I mean, it's very easy, and I think it doesn't stop at people in the audience. It's everyone up here. We can easily become complacent because it is overwhelming.
Yes.
And it's exhausting, and it's emotionally too much to take in a lot of the time. But you have representation in government. We have representation at the European Parliament. I mean, the advocacy I do is mostly facing the UK government, which has different leverages in regard to the Middle East. But you can lobby, you can advocate to your MEPs, you can advocate to your local representatives to lobby MEPs, you can go to your TDs. And I think particularly within faith communities, you have a community there to talk to and to listen to, and that has always historically been able to, to move behind justice movements, and that can be done. And
David, I mean, like, we're going from here. You work in 10 places around the nation, just Jesuit Refugee Services. What kind of stuff are you doing on the ground that we could get engaged with?
Well, firstly, I think it's a very interesting question to look at how an individual gets engaged, because we're talking about something, when we mention international aspects of it, that's so complex, that it's so huge. It's like trying to engage with climate change and as an individual. You need national policies, you need international regional agreements.
But yeah, you would agree, by us eating less types of food, we can engage in the climate change,
No, of course, and we can, every individual can make their own individual contribution. I completely concur with that. But I do think we have to challenge ourselves also as individuals. I mean, whether it's from a faith base, a faith that does justice, or whatever moral code you hold. When, as Marissa mentioned, the abundance of phone calls that came in, and the outpouring of support, we received similar calls, and we couldn't necessarily direct people much further than through the advocacy route to say, look, if you want to have a greater national response, then you need to talk to your local representatives so that they can inform the government policy. But we also did say, look, we're present in direct provision. And for a lot of people who we spoke to, there was a moment on the phone, a what? What's that? Okay. And there is a narrative out there that gets fed into about the deserving and the undeserving, and people in direct provision often get forgotten. So I think it's important that we challenge ourselves as individuals or as faith groups, that we're not just responding to what we see or what the media sees as the key crisis. Obviously, as has been outlined, the situation in Syria is horrific. But we know there are forgotten crises throughout the world that aren't getting similar attention. And I think we need, on an individual basis, to ensure that we're not getting caught up in a narrative that's not particularly helpful. As far as how to support or how to engage, I think one of the key things at the moment that's blocking or that unites the discussion is people trying to leave direct provision and people coming into Ireland through the EU programmes needing to integrate into the community, and there's a complete dearth of properties.
Well, there's a great question. I think, like, how do we help other families, I hate that phrase, the other, actually, but how do we help families that are in direct provision who are feeling isolated? What's a good welcome look like?
It's a very, very good question. I was at a talk during the week, and that issue came up. There was a speaker, a Sudanese speaker, who had lived in direct provision for 8 years and spoke about these imaginary walls that exist between direct provision and the community. There's policy reasons for that. The fact that asylum seekers are not beneficiaries of any integration strategy. They're excluded from that by design. So the best practice that integration should begin from the point of arrival, it's not facilitated, or it certainly hasn't been in the last 15, 17 years. So it falls then on communities to take actions within a policy framework that's not really encouraging them to do so. When the direct provision system was formed, individual parishes around the country set up groups, and they aligned themselves with various direct provision centres, and they tried to engage with the residents, they tried to provide them with services, they tried to have a dialogue. Now, over time, the attrition of the system, the attrition of engaging with it, and just seeing people in front of you rot and live in limbo, a lot of those groups actually fell away or were disbanded for a variety of reasons. But they did play a very important role. It did allow for a bridge between the community and what often are isolated centres. So I think that would be something to look at again.
Thank you, David. Thiru, I'm just interested. I mean, we only have a few minutes left here, and I want to come to Marissa one more time if I could, please. You're hearing all this. You're hearing from government, from international and national agencies, and you yourself are someone who we're talking about effectively in the third person. Even you are here and you are welcome. What does a good welcome look like to you?
I think it's I don't know, because they look us from the outside. I'm starting from the media, like whenever they mention about the Irishman, undocumented Irishman live in Boston, when they mention about us, illegal immigrant live in Ireland.
Okay.
That's a different,
Yes.
actually. So, like when I was in the direct provision, it's a four people in the same room. Small room, toilet inside, and one is from Niger, one is from Afghanistan, one is from Sri Lanka, and one is from Bangladesh. Me Hindu and Buddhist and Muslim and Christian. Unknown adults forced to live in one room, not 1 month. The madam says like it's emergency, that's what they organize this shelter.
Mm-hmm.
Emergency for 21 days, 1 month is okay. 1 year, 2 year, 3 year, 4 year, 5 year, 8 years, 9 years. Forced to live in one room, and they gave, the managers, private managers is look aftering refugees. They are treating us like a slaves, like you can't, if you report against them, they will transfer you immediately from the hostel.
Okay.
Whatever food they cooked, we have no right to study. We have no right to work. We have no right to choose our own food. Whatever they cooked, if you want, just go and eat one day. I'm like first 2 weeks I'm vomiting, actually. You may say like, we are providing food. You are lucky. Some African countries, wherever people are, suffering without food, you are lucky at least. Yeah, you may say. But the problem is, they paid a lot. Why these managers treating like this? The pain. Like, I'm an expert in EIA. When I came here, EIA means Environmental Impact Assessment. Now I forget the spelling.
Right.
Because 6 years, I have no chance. Forget all skills, everything. When they know the doctor gave the report, he is mental, then they grant the status. Yeah. Now I forgot to fly, how to fly, and they ask me, get out now, go and find your life. How is possible?
Yeah.
After the World War, they organized Vietnam symptom, because the military affected people who have here, no, nothing. If you go to the doctor, they have painkillers, and if you take, you are a doll. That's it.
Right.
I have enough experience because I came through 2 torture prisons, and I didn't get anything. When I came out after 6 years, and I'm like, I don't know how to live, and they have to understand the people's mind and psychologically.
It's very
hard. Every day Guardi came because they are beating each other. Whenever my experience, I live with nearly 20 countries people these 4 or 5 years. When people came inside, they are very good people. Like African boy, still I remember, he's a nice guy. First month, nice guy. Second, third month, fourth month, he changed.
Yeah.
Find some bad guys and change his life. Totally after he got the paper, he's a drug addict now. His life is finished. Maybe the process, name of the process, of course, they are limited. I heard the very limited staffs in the Ministry of Justice, so that's what take time. So, but after I came out, I came here. I never even imagined I'm going to leave the country, but it's happened. I came here, and now I turn back. Is there anything? Lucky I'm like son is with me.
Yeah.
Otherwise, my complete young age is gone.
Yeah.
10 years is gone.
Yeah.
I can't get back. And the attitude, I heard a lot, to change people attitude. It's called, some people are helping, but it's called in English. I'm very sorry for my bad English because I learned English after 2010. So
look, I speak bad English. It's my first language. So you're good.
So, like treating people, if you go out, after direct provision, if you go out, and some people straight away ask me, how iron hard you have to viewing Irish house. It's very hard to answer. And someone still, I remember in Dublin too. Even my dog is German Shepherd.
Yeah.
So, it's many, you know what I mean. You understand what I mean? Like, you have to aware through the media, that's what I said, undocumented and illegal.
Yeah.
Because still, we have no multicultural experience. Even in the car, I think I'm the only one walking in the road. Everyone knows different people. I'm the different man.
Yeah.
When I apply for jobs with my name,
Yes.
I can't. Then one of my friend told me, he's from the Refugee Service Council. He's working. Change my name. Change Rory and send the CV. I change and send the CV. Next week, I received 10 interviews. That's it. So you have to change. You have to understand the psychological effects.
Yes.
How, because totally cultural change, climate change,
Yes.
everything suddenly change, and they don't know what they're doing. And if I came here, when I faced the interview, he's asked, question. Because I said I came from different, just allow me. No, he's shouting and throwing and kind of, he used the word, still I remember. My people told me I'm a hero. He told me you are a traitor. That's what they abduct you. Still in the case paper. So that's how they treated us in the justice.
But Thiru, first of all,
please.
Thank you for your honesty.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
No, it's okay.
That
Just
happened to
consider
you. Truly
the
am.
difference.
I'm not saying that in a patronizing way,
Yeah.
but I can understand how that would erode me in ways that I couldn't define.
Yeah.
Marissa, just finally come back to you there. You're wanting to say something, and feel free, and then we'll finish up.
Going last is always a bit terrifying. Just kind of very practically in terms of what we're talking about here today, how can individuals and groups make a difference? In terms of what Máiréad was talking about, global solutions to forced displacement, which really is what's needed. I mean, 86% of the world's refugees are living in developing countries with no access to services and very little foreign aid getting to them. Ireland is vying for a non-permanent seat on the UN Security Council in 2020. Ireland is known internationally and in diplomatic circles for its very strong role in conflict resolution, and specifically with faith-based organisations who've contributed to that. So there is an opportunity for all of us here today to talk to our elected representatives about making conflict resolution an absolute priority for the Irish government in our campaign at the Security Council, and if we're successful in getting a seat. Second to that, at the European Union level, my colleagues who work more in foreign policy than I do would say that Ireland and actually Luxembourg are the two lone voices at the table now in trying to be progressive on migration. Even states we would have respected in the past, like Denmark, who would have been very pro-refugees, had quite an open door policy, good domestic policies for asylum seekers. They're now closing their doors. They're taking, when people from Syria arrive, they're taking their wedding rings and saying it's collateral for being housed. And Ireland really needs to hold the line, and much as our own system isn't great, at least keep an international and European foreign policy that's based on fundamental rights and not at stopping people from reaching our shores. And then at domestic level, I don't think I can add anything to what Thiru said, because that was absolutely profound and powerful from somebody who's experienced it. But we do know that racism is rising in Ireland. Incidences of hate speech are becoming more acceptable. People have been physically attacked, and I think in probably a lot of people here's day-to-day lives, certainly I've seen it. Racist insults and jibes are now quite common on the streets of Dublin, whereas I don't remember that when I was growing up. So I think all of us have to call that out. We also have to work with the media, as Thiru said, and work with each other, because definitely a better world is possible, and I think everybody here is behind that. And then my very last comment I'll make is, even within groups of people who are marginalised, there's other marginalisations that we don't see. So for example, in the community of people who are living in direct provision or who are part of our refugee community in Ireland, if you're a very old person, if you're somebody who's been a victim of sexual violence, if you're gay or lesbian, you have additional marginalities that you are facing, along with all the other marginalities of being somebody often of colour who doesn't speak the language, who's traumatised here in Ireland in our current environment. And I think that's quite difficult for those of us who want to engage to see. So also being clear that, as Dave said, trying to work as faith groups with people in those communities, also having a look, if you know that somebody is struggling with a specific issue, where are the supports that they can receive, and directing them there, because a lot of people in direct provision, they're often frightened to use the internet because they're worried that somebody else is watching what they're Googling. So there's protection risks there. So just being conscious as you reach out to people that there's probably other areas they're less comfortable talking about with you, but there's ways that you can make them feel better and feel more secure and welcome in Ireland by addressing that.
Very well said, thank you. Carol, Marissa, Máiréad, Thiru, David, thank you very, very much for your time. Please give a round of applause to our panelists.